So very good afternoon. I think after the last interesting session with all the top athletes, it's difficult to keep up the same tempo. But I think we will try to do the best because the topic on which we are going to be talking is how technology is trying to revolutionize sport, and in many ways, and particularly with doctor being there, it is also technology how it comes from the point of view of evolving and the sport itself. And those are some of the things which we are going to be talking. So, we keep hearing a lot of things, with regard to metaverse, with regard to, Web 3.0, the augmented reality and so on and so forth. But, to some purists, the feeling is that technology really, and when it comes to physical sport, is really technology going to be revolutionizing the way it has, for example, in the fintech sector or the agri-tech sector, or is it just a hype? So that's something which we are going to be talking about today. And, I would like to start with maybe Vasanth, you coming in first and being closest to me on the seat. So, recently I was reading that, Magic Johnson, for example, has, bought in stake in virtual world, taken franchises through a sporting company called Kinvent. He's also put in his own basketball league on the virtual world. In India, closer home, recently, I don't know how many of you have seen in January, the NFTs for Milkha Singh were launched in India. And incidentally, the company which launched it is a junior of mine from my college, so I know it better than, most of you would. But that has happened. So now, and since you are into a lot of grassroots sports, I have always thought of kids looking up to their idols and models, putting in a lot of effort and investments into actual real sport. Whereas what is happening is people are putting in money into virtual sports, and if I could call it that, the sports verse, right? A take from the metaverse part is slowly building up. How do you see, what is going to be the impact of this when it comes to really, bringing in more kids to play versus more kids getting into esports and the likes?
Well, that's a lot of questions packed into one. So I want to say thanks to Sportstar and the Hindu for having me over today. It's been a long association for me as well, 35 plus years. Having said that, let's take a step back and look at this from a macro perspective, right? I mean, if you broadly look at the application of technology in sport itself, it pans across, let's say, broadly segmented, first an athlete, a sports person, then it's the spectator, and the third could be a sports administrator, broadly, broken down into three buckets. And then if you look at everything that we talk about from a technology perspective, then you will find that in many ways, the experiences that each of these segments get out of technology today is still in its nascency. Now, if you look at this from a player's perspective, right? I mean, broadly, a player would depend on technology, one for skill development, the other is the competition analytics space. Now, how do I use technology to help me strategize against a particular opponent and opposition? Or if there is a certain limitation with my technique, so how do I use video and analysis there to help me develop that? Now then, if you also look at this from a spectator's perspective, and if you take it from the Indian context, I think there is a certain level of disservice that is offered to a paying spectator in our context today. A spectator walks into a stadium, it's a nightmare in most cases. And then we are talking about some of the finest sporting extravaganzas that are being hosted in India today. So how long is this going to remain if you don't address the spectator's needs? And then you have the examples of the Michigan University Stadium in Detroit, where there is GPS-driven parking slots allotted to spectators. There is F&B that you can order from your seat. Immersive technologies coming in where you can choose your camera angle from which you can watch a particular action. There are multiple things like this. From an administrator's point of view, there is transparency, there is integrity to the way you can function by using technology as well. So just to cut this response short, because we have several other panelists who I'm sure will weigh in into this, My sense is that the potential that technology holds is immense, much to be explored, lots of opportunities for tech entrepreneurs, very few players, so therefore the whole ecosystem is pregnant with possibility in that context.
Wonderful. Okay, so building on to that, I would put in the next question, because I think one important point which Vasanth made here was using analytics, and that's something which my co-panelist here and Ramky has been doing for X number of years, so many years, and he's provided those inputs which you rightly mentioned to the administrators, to the players, to the teams. How do you think, Ramky, this explosion of technology, particularly with metaverse coming in, I'm assuming that there is much more data which is going to get generated, and how are you, for example, as an entrepreneur preparing for it, and what is the future trend which you see is going to come in with the metaverse and the various other technologies which are going to be, for example, one of the important things which Vasanth brought out was fan engagement and the experience of the fan in the stadium. So I'll put this into two parts. One, from the purely analytics space that you are into, how do you see that shaping up? And secondly, also how the data analytics itself is going to improve some of the experiences of the fans and the administrators.
Okay. Thanks. First of all, big thank you for Sportstar for inviting me. And unfortunately, couldn't be there in person today. I'm feeling under the weather. But thanks to technology again, it saved us able to participate from a remote location. There is going to be an explosion of data happening around an athlete today. Okay, let's take the athlete alone first, because the center of the whole thing is the athlete. Of course, we come to the fans, where the fan experience is the most important thing, because the fans are the most important to the game. And today, there is an explosion of data happening around the athlete, and you need systems, and you need people to capture those data and bring about various kind of correlations between your technique, your tactic, your workload, your injury. All of it has to be, there's a whole lot of data happening, and there is some agencies needs to study all that, provide all the correlations, and provide all the, translate it into a language in which the coaches and the players can understand. It's not about bringing up the data. The data alone is so huge, and you need somebody to make sense of the data and provide them just so that makes it easier for them to absorb, internalize, and execute. 25% goes into all the research, analytics, in terms of the tactical things. 25% goes into all the research, and 25% goes into how well you embed it to the subconscious mind of the player. And out there on the 50% goes to his execution. But how well he executes depends upon his first two blocks. The research and the subconscious insertion is what we say. How can we improve the recall while he is there at the center of the wicket with Chris Gale hitting you for 4 boundaries? So what do you do the next ball? Those kind of scenarios, situations in any sport. Okay. And for us, it is all about data, whether it is table tennis, whether it's tennis, whether it's badminton, whether it's squash. There is a whole lot of data floating around, and a lot of which of it not being collected at all. So unless we have the data collected, can the analytics come and help us? So we started putting up the data pipelines for the data to flow in seamlessly, so that the analytics team can play a bigger role than what it is. And there is so totally today there is a whole lot of new possibilities, and technology is driving it. The data today is being collected by sensors. You can collect it through computer vision. Then there is IoT. So there is a whole lot of technologies which are available, and we need to apply it at the right place at the right time. I mean, you should not do something fancy for the sake of doing it. It's more important to exactly weigh the utility and can also think about what is the outcome we are generating with the technology by applying the right technology.
So, Ramky, continuing on this, I just had an add-on question for you. So, like you mentioned that there is a lot of data which is available, and outside of cricket, if we were to look at some of the other sports, do you think that data, the second part is obviously putting in the process to have the data collected, but do you think that data itself is available? Because, I have seen if you go to, for example, an archery federation or you go to a fencing federation or any of those federations, other federations, and typically we are talking about the Olympic sports. Do we even have the data? And what has been your experience, as an analytics entrepreneur in this space? Do you even get the data for it to be analyzed and give the feedback to the athlete or the administrator or the coach?
It is not readily available. Everywhere people are, learning about it and getting ready. But you need to set the process in place. As I said, set the pipelines in place so that authentic data comes in, and proper data quality is important for the analysis to be accurate. And you need to have a big sample size, and so it's important for us to all to start very start straight away, because there's so much of data happening, and if you don't collect that, you lose a big opportunity there, and you are always lagging behind. So how do you get an edge over others is by using the data. And India is an analytics country. We are the poster boys of business analytics. So why not in sports? India has a great chance of being a global leader in sports analytics. And I think all we have to do is to set up the pipelines, provide the smartness quotient towards the development of the player, athlete, and towards performance and towards fan engagement, where today people are going gaga over live streaming, which is good for a start, but live streaming, in my opinion, is like a VCR of old days. Okay, I think on the digital you can do far more interactive things, immersive things, which can bring about the fan experience and the fan engagement to a different level.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So, Doctor, I come to you now with this. I think an important point which Ramky made was that, a lot of this data, for example, from an athlete's perspective, goes and can help, and it could be, what he was referring to probably is predictive analytics, and, wherein and have treated athletes and helping them reduce the bench time. So now I am talking about, so, I wanted to understand from you, so while the digitization of a lot of things and things like metaverse will perhaps do some revolution in sports in a different manner, what is, in your view, what has been in the last decade or so, because you've been performing surgeries for such a long time, in the medical science part of it, what are the trends or the changes, key changes which you have seen in the way you've been performing the surgeries, which technology has brought in?
Hello. Yeah, at the outset, I'd like to thank the Sportstar and the Hindu for giving this opportunity and inviting me. So I'll be talking more on the sports science. So the technology into surgery, there are so many computer-navigated surgeries, robotic surgeries, not much into sports surgery. But whereas before surgery, as you initially mentioned, the technology has revolutionized the sports right now in India. How it can categorize in three compartments. One, the technology whereby you assess the performance of an athlete, doing a biomechanics or exercise physiology and sports psychology and those kind of things. Sports psychology and those kind of, to assess the performance. Then also use that for training, right? And then the rehabilitation. And if you see the last decade or so, the big change is the rehabilitation. There's not much of big change in the surgical technique, how you rehabilitate them. And that's where you have this anti-gravity treadmill and various other technological innovation things like assessing the data, as Ramky mentioned, analytics. How you get those data? So we have a biomechanical lab, as you know, where you have to come to one center where everything is standardized. But now those things can be achieved in real time on the field, various GPS enhanced chips, where when the one thing, whenever you do analysis of a performance in a simulated condition, that's in a lab, something where it lacks the actual competition, that is now overcome by having a small chip on the dress, where the entire 1.5 hour or during the play, either is even the cricket or football, entire duration is various parameters can be in your laptop, like your heart rate, VO2 max, intensity of training. And also there are some trauma center patches that also assess the impact, so that then that can give you certain impact, can even for concussion. You know, those kind of things can be assessed in the with this technology innovation. And the rehabilitation, that's the real big thing in the recent years, whereby the bench time, you said the bench time, how you reduce the bench time. Of course, surgical, we make it keyhole surgery, so that reduces the trauma and immediate recovery. But going back to his pre-injury level, that's these technologies, the big way, as he mentioned, where there is anti-gravity treadmill, completely the gravity is eliminated up to 20 to 100%. So his recuperation is much faster. Then there is other devices like bioskeleton, all those things, and robotic arm, so that they can get back to normal strength and conditioning immediately after surgery, especially lower limb surgery, where you have to put weight, and those things are all happening now.
So if I understand correctly, you are trying to hint at that technology is probably, is changing the way it used to be pre-injury as well as post-injury. But what about when the athlete is actually injured and you are performing a surgical procedure, is there a technology change which has happened in the last decade or so, which has drastically changed the way let's say the ACL was performed?
Well, now we understand the biomechanics we need better. In fact, ACL, as I said, we used to think as a single ligament. Now we know it got two bundles. So more technically, we reconstruct in one bundle, so that we try to maintain that. And also recently, gene technology has come in a way where we can analyze the athlete's gene either by blood or by saliva, and you can see what is the risk for his particular genetic profile. Also, we can assess his nutritional status of a particular gene, and then we can customize and tailor-made his dietary requirement.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Kevin, are you able to hear us? Dr. Kevin, hi. So, I think...
yes, I can hear you.
Right. So, I am aware that you work as the Chief Innovation Officer at this new company called Kinvent. So, first, I would like you to share with the audience here what you are doing. And second question is where, some of our co-panelists spoke about is, technology has come in different forms. So how do you see Kinvent, for example, is it a wearable technology as a product, or is it a product as a service? And what possible use cases in terms of addressing, let's say, elite level athletes to grassroots level, what type of use cases are you trying to address through your platform?
All right, so I'm really glad that
you can probably start by giving a
today.
little introduction of Kinvent. What is your platform?
Yes. Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank Sportstar for inviting me here to talk about this passionating topic, which is sports technology. I'm the French guy here, but I want to say that I lived in India for 2 years. I was actually the head of science at Inspire Institute of Sport in India 2 years back. So I had the pleasure to work with some of your dear athletes like Neeraj, Bajrang Punia, or Sudha Singh, to name a few, but there is more. So what do we do at Kinvent actually? So we basically make a sportsman biomechanics lab in a suitcase. That's basically what we do. So we do force plates, movement sensor, dynamometer for traction, pulling dynamometer, grip strength. And everything is synchronized in the one single app, which means that not only we collect the data from the devices separately, but we are also able to merge them. So there is really two engineering process in Kinvent. Is one to build the sensors. We control completely the manufacturing. So we control what is in, what kind of sensor, what kind of technology. And on top of that, we have the app and all the engineering and signal analysis. So this allows us, for example, to merge the force signal with the movement sensor signal and have angle of your knee at the same time that we have the force of your jump recorded. So we make force plates also as well, like you might have guessed. We are not so new because we are 5 years old and we are already in 51 countries. So obviously mostly in Europe, but we are also in India actually. Just starting, and in the US. We have around 5,000 users currently. So very typical use case. Let's take just Neeraj. With Neeraj, I was used to, when he spent 2 months at the Inspire Institute, I was used to record his elbow strength during the whole process of rehab. But at that time I didn't have the Kinvent solution, and I was obliged to record with a dynamometer, and that was not analogic. So I had to write down on the paper and then put it in my Excel file, merge it with all the data from the other tests, let's say force plates or sprints we were doing, whatever we were doing for him, and then create my reports. So, for example, technology is very useful for one, having something very portable that you can transport. Even when your athletes travel, go in another country, you can do monitoring, you can do all that in a very easy way. Just a reminder that force plates were $40,000 to $50,000 just 10 years back. And now we are getting force plates at around $5,000, $8,000. So it's way cheaper. That's also an evolution of the technology. On top of that, Bluetooth, we have only Bluetooth connection. So now no cables, no stuff like that. It's very more practical. And third element, and before, when you were using force plate, you had to use, let's say, MATLAB to do all the analysis, the phases detection of the jump, and whatever, the RFD, rate of force development, all that. Now, I have engineer doing this, implementing all those very complex algorithms in the app, and you can perform your test in 10 seconds. It's as easy as I can make my daughter do it, So this is how it is so powerful. So you have everything in the same place. You get the analysis in a blink of an eye, and all KPIs, all parameters that you want to record, you can actually track them in time. And obviously, we were talking about sports analytics before. That's the next step. Now we are looking at the data from the community, and we are going to be able very soon to give some information about, like, let's say you have an ACL injury. If you are doing that kind of performance at 5 months, then you might come back on the field at 9 months, or if not, you might come back 2 months later. Based on the data of the community, we can start giving more insights into this is the good path, this is the wrong path, this is how to correct the path. We can give so many also educational content. It's all in the cloud, so you can just click on your app, you get an ebook explaining you everything you need to know. So it's also an educational tool on top of being an analyzing tool. So that's the kind of things I can mention. And I was mentioning the shoulder of Niraj, but you can mention also the recovery of Bajrang, which was an issue. And that's why I'm mentioning also the travel part, because I remember having the physiotherapist on the phone saying, okay, what should I do for recovery? Okay, one topic. But second, how do I know that it's working? Okay, that's for example, with a grip strength, a very basic grip strength that you can do every morning or twice a week, you can know very easily the neuromuscular fatigue. Obviously, you can use a wellness questionnaire on top of that. You can use metabolic measurement like, let's say, lactate, heart rate variability. All that, now with technology, you can integrate everything, not only Kinvent in the Kinvent app, but also in what we call athlete management software. And you can the whole picture of your athlete in a blink of an eye. And that's a game changer because everything is made easy.
Great. So I think, going by what you've described, Dr. Kevin, it seems, it's child's play because your daughter also can do it. So, but still, I don't see the uptake of, technology in sports in general in India. And that's a very, general statement which I am doing, panel here could differ. But, generally what we've seen is that, there is good technology. India has the strength of developing good tech products, but like Vasanth earlier pointed out, and Ramky also mentioned, I think somewhere we are, while we are leaders in developing, technology platforms when it comes to software, etc. I think we are laggards in terms of putting process in place for either collecting data or doing the needful to make technology work for us. Particularly one of the areas, and coming back to you, Vasanth, is, how do you get the coaches and the physical education teachers and so on and so forth to understand this and use it? So if we have, like Dr. Kevin mentioned, a biomechanics lab in a suitcase, can it be taken to schools? Can certain things be corrected or trainings be given to children at the school level? In terms of correcting their posture, in terms of, playing the game the right way so that injuries can be minimized. And following up with that question, is my question to you, are the schools and the school ecosystem in India ready for that?
One word answer would be no. But having said that,
so how do you make it possible?
See, I was also listening to the conversation with the previous panel when there was a question related to how do you build sport ground up from, developing a high performance center, looking at Olympic medals and things like that. I want to share some data with the audience here. If you look at my sport, table tennis, we have about 5,000 registered players who compete at different age groups at the national level today. It's 5,000 players producing 8 Commonwealth medals in 2018. Now, if this were to convert to 50,000 players, is an Olympic dream a distant dream? It's not. Now, how do we make this 5,000, 50,000? And that is where I believe technology has a major role to play. Because India is a country today where the supply-demand mismatch in terms of qualified coaches, competent coaches, trained people who can take the sport to the hinterlands is simply not there. That funnel is not there. That ecosystem doesn't yet exist. So in the short to medium term, the only bridge that can step in is technology. And like some of my co-panelists were saying, it's so easy to play, host how to play a sport video on the cloud and let people watch. A picture speaks 1,000 words. So let kids get infrastructural access, get there, and then play. So this, I think, has to be the panacea of the ill that we face in terms of how do we talk about demographic advantages, we talk about, reaping demographic dividends, But how are these dividends going to come if there is no delivery system in place? So this is where I think technology has a major, major, major contributing role to play. Now, we had Vishy Anand speak earlier this morning here. Vishy Anand School of Chess. How many people in this in this country, aspiring chess players, have access to his teachings? He can't create 10,000 coaches tomorrow. He needs to depend on technology for this. These are the opportunities where, tech entrepreneurs can come in, play a role. But having said this, a word of caution again. At the end of the day, let's, especially us people who dabble in technology, should always be aware that we are going to be support providers. We are not going to go there and play and win a medal for our country. So that is also something that we need to keep in mind. But we can be people who can provide phenomenal advantages to those that are talented and who have the potential. So that's my limited point on.
Yeah, thank you, Vasanth. That was an interesting point. So you are basically saying we need to create a Khan Academy for sports. Maybe take a sport like chess to kids everywhere. But having said that, I think I'll go back to Ramky again on this, that, so for the moment, Ramky, if you were to leave aside the analytics bit and picking up a cue from what Vasanth was mentioning, what do you think could be the two trends which, and we'll have to do it quickly because I've been told that we have very limited time. What are the two trends which you see in the next decade happening in India when it comes to technology revolution in sports? How do you see sports technology coming up in India?
I think, from what like Vasanth said earlier, it's a video generation. So I think a lot more video is going to come in play. And, India, there are about 25 million kids playing sport in India, aged between 8 and 19. And you had, the amount of coaches you have is very little. So, it is a classic use case for AI ML. And when I say AI, you're not talking about artificial intelligence alone, you're talking about augmented intelligence. And how do we augment the coaches with enough data and intelligence, which can make them more productive, which can help them scale up and coach a large number of people online from a remote location. And these are things which are, COVID has taught us to embrace technology in a bigger way. Now we are doing things in a very, getting used to doing things from a remote location. So earlier coaching was not, people thought that coaching cannot be done in using the online platform, but today, everybody has realized that it is possible. And we see more of the kids taking the videos from a remote village and uploading it to a cloud, and then the experts analyzing those videos and providing feedback to the kid.
Right. Thank you so much. So I think, quickly I'll just summarize in 30 seconds. So I think we had a discussion around how analytics and the technologies around it could really help, the sports people, the athlete, the administrators, as well as, coaches. We, on the other hand, we had Dr. Kevin talking about, their platform, which is like a biomechanics lab in a suitcase, which can actually analyze data with very, very handy instrumentation and some software. We also had Doctor here talking about how technology is changing surgery. So I think with this, I would actually open the house and for questions. So please.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am associated with the sport of hockey. The next panelist will be Mr. V. Bhaskaran coming over here. My question is to Mr. Ramky and Dr. Kevin. Mr. V. Bhaskaran, Olympian, he always stresses in our internal meetings and all. He talks about reducing the unforced errors of players so as to keep the advantage to our side. Usually we speak more of unforced errors in individual sports, but not that much in team sports. In team sports, we do speak about unforced errors, but only in the closed-door meetings. How much of data analytics that you have developed, deployed in all these years towards teaching a player in the post-match analysis to reduce his unforced errors within the game context? I'm asking with respect to hockey. I feel it can be applied to any other team sport also. Dr. Kevin or Ramky could answer.
So, could you get the question, Ramky, Dr. Kevin?
Yeah, kind of. Dr. Kevin, you want to take it up?
I can do a short one and let you answer the rest. I think the answer to your question, I will not answer everything, but in terms of data, what is the most important is to make sense of the data, both for the staff and for the athlete. So one revolution we have to make is one, to explain and to give sense to the data. One thing I'm used to say is an applied scientist is not a scientist. It's two different jobs. And as an applied scientist or as a coach or as a trainer, aware of science, you have to select a meaningful but small amount of data, make sense of it, and then get your athletes on board to make sense of the data too. So one thing we are changing with Kinvent, for example, is to share all the data with the patient, so the patient know where he stands. And this is very, very important, because we get, with all those data, we have so much to see and so little to make sense. So we have to make a choice, and we have to select and say, okay, this is the data I want to make sense of, until I decide otherwise. And that I will tell my athletes that this is the data I use, this is what it means to me, and this is what it means to you. And once this is settled, then you can start using data properly. That's my takeaway from my side.
Yeah, the data throws out a lot of patterns, and it's all about studying those patterns and then coming up with how we are going to exploit it. For instance, a small study comes to my mind, though it's a bit old. In London Olympics, a team made about 480 substitutions, rolling substitutions, right, in hockey. And there was another team which made only 240 substitutions. On an average, at Team A, the players play only 4 minutes on the field, whereas the other team, they played the full 70 minutes. So these are the kind of data points which come out of the overall thing. And this is only a small thing which we are talking about, the workload here. How much of time is a hockey player spending on the field, and what is the kind of role he's playing? Is it predictable? Can he play multi-dimensional roles, or is he playing only one role? All those are the constraints. So data in all gives you a whole lot of things, but you must know what you're looking for. And so, as I said, you need somebody who can translate the data into a language which can be easily understandable by the coach and the support staff.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have one more question to Mr. Vasanth. Again, from the perspective of game decisions being taken from the sidelines by the coaches. By using more and more data, are we taking out the element of underdogs from the modern sport?
Like I alluded to a little while ago, I do firmly believe that it is very important for the technology support providers to recognize that the element of competition, what happens on the field, instant reactions are things that are going to continue to remain. A tech entrepreneur, a tech company, a tech analyst is only going to be able to provide trends, provide data points, like Ramky just now said. To the example that he gave, it is up to the coach and that particular team to determine whether those substitutions made sense to them or not. But the analyst will always turn around and say, look, this is what I observed from this particular game. But if the coach believes that that was essential, then he is the man to decide on that particular job. It is for the tech person to go back there and tell him that, look, this is what I observed. Just because someone comes and tells you that this is where your ball landed most of the time, doesn't necessarily mean that it is right or wrong. It is for the coach to then interpret that. So technology always is, like in all fields, is an enabler. It can never be the decision maker. It can influence the decision. But the decision maker has to be the coach or the captain at that point in time. Hopefully that has answered.
Understood, sir. Understood. Thank you.
My question is to Dr. Arumugam. Doctor, you have a major facility in Chennai. We've been talking about technology in sports, science in sports. You got a cutting-edge technology, state-of-the-art. I mean, you got a biomechanical center. You got cricket pitches, different cricket pitches. You got a 400-meter indoor track. I mean, all that. And do you think those facilities are being put to good use? Facilities are there for the taking.
Yeah, the straight answer will be no. It is not fully utilized. The gap is still the awareness or the importance of the sports science analysis is not spread among the administrators and coaches to the extent what we expect to. And still there is a lack in that. And many of them would have pointed out, my panelist, is final decision making is the coaches. They have to be kind of more open to this new development, because first they have to kind of adapt themselves. That's going to change the way how their proteges, their students going to come out well. So it is not fully utilized. Also, like the government, the big support is coming through both the central government and state government, but they also should make the sports science analysis, sports science assessment should be mandatory for the athlete. That is still not being made. It's more like optional for individual athlete.
Any way we can, rope in more athletes into your program?
Well, it's we are open to all the other athletes, but now system is just that like athlete has to choose. It's their right to subject themselves to any biomechanical assessment or any other testing. So we cannot really kind of say everybody has to go through that. So it's open to the athletes and who manage the athletes to subject them to these kind of recent advances. But this has been done in other countries. If you see, we are talking so much about our vision, dream about attaining more medals. We are on the right track, but to see the end of the tunnel is we need to make sure all our athletes go through that assessment, and now it's available. So many centers are there. So really, it's now the decision makers to make it possible or mandatory for the athlete has to go through this kind of testing.
Thank you, Doctor.
If I may add to what Doctor said, to your question, the primary challenge here is to be able to invest in the adoption of technology by the people who really need to use them, which is the coaching community. There is a certain reservation with the way they approach technology today, and that needs to change immediately. Point one. Point two is, other than certain elite athletes in our country, the rest of the community hasn't really understood the benefits of injury prevention. It's always about, having an injury and then going for correction and rehab and things like that. So to give you an example, the simple sciences of podiatry, which essentially addresses, a delay in the wear and tear of the hip and below, all the joints in the hip and below, are some things that are low-hanging fruit. It can ensure that athletes last longer. Your training can be more intensive with certain interventions by eminently qualified people like him. But these are things that are available but are not being utilized. So the awareness is a challenge, and the coaches community that needs to adopt technology is also a big challenge. So I think therein lies the root cause of why such centers are being underutilized.
Okay, so thank you, gentlemen. I think we are up with the time. So in the end, I just wanted that, broadly the discussions, I think I can put it in one line is technology will provide inputs for human delivery, but it is the human inputs to technology which will actually bring the revolution. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen.